Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. You are watching and listening to Historian Radio's Echoes of the News, and I am Muhammad Hussain Qazi, and these are today's headlines from the past. Before we begin with the headlines, we begin with the commemoration of the feast day of Hilda, patron saint of business and professional women. And moving forward, on this day, the 17th of November 1603, the trial of Sir Walter Raleigh began. He was falsely accused of treason and had been offered a large sum of money by Lord Cobham, a critic of England's King James I, to make peace with the Spanish and put Arabella Stuart, James's cousin, on the throne. These allegations would result in the trial of Sir Walter Raleigh. Raleigh claimed he turned down the offer, but Lord Cobham, who told his accusers that Raleigh was involved in the plot, was most definitely responsible for ensuring that Sir Walter Raleigh would go down in British history as one of the most controversial figures. Moving forward, on this day in 1869, the first cycle road race, 83 miles from Paris to Rouen, was won by England's James Moore, a fascinating incident from the history of cycle-related sports. Continuing on this date, in 1922, two of the most iconic incidents would happen on the same day. Actually, three of the most iconic headlines from the political sphere would occur today. We begin with the last Sultan of Turkey being deposed by Kemal Ataturk, forming the Republic of Turkey and nailing the last nail in the coffin for the Ottoman Empire. This would be followed by the vote being done by Siberia on the same day, the 16th of November 17th of November 1922, when Siberia would vote for union with the USSR. On the same day that Britain would elect its first communist politician to the House of Commons, J.T. Walton Newbold, who was standing for Motherwell, Scotland. He would eventually join the Labour Party of UK. This is a fascinating moment in the history of, the contemporary world, as well, for a multitude of reasons, as we see the formation of modern Turkey being done, the election of the first communist politician to the House of Commons, the joining of Siberia into the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics, riveting pieces of information from this day, the 17th of November, 1922. How fascinating it is that we began with the 17th of November 1603, one of the most iconic moments in British political history, and we have once more returned to said iconic moment in again the history of British politics. Now, without much further ado, we turn our attention to Egypt, where in 1954 King Farouk of Egypt was sent into exile and General Nasser, or Colonel Nasser at the time, became head of state. Colonel Jamal or Gamal Abdel Nasser, depending on your pronunciation, would form the Arab Republic of Egypt. His deposition of the King of Egypt would mark the beginning of one of the most significant chapters in the history of the Cold War. And on the subject of the Cold War, we conclude with the headlines section with this headline that on this day, the 17th of November 1970, the Soviet Union, or the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics, launched the unmanned spacecraft Luna that would land on the moon. This established a precedent of the pinnacle of Soviet aerospace engineering that they had started manufacturing in the age of analog and piloted aircraft and spacecraft, unmanned spacecraft, as has been made evident by the incident we discussed on yesterday's broadcast with the launching of Venus 3, which would land on Venus as one of the first unmanned spacecrafts to take such a journey. Luna 2 would, Luna TOO, not Luna as in the number 2, Luna 2 would secure its place in the pantheon of unmanned spacecraft, which have secured their place in history. And with that, we conclude today's headlines of the day. And now we move on to the next segment of our show where we recount the famous births and deaths of famous figures from the 19th and 20th centuries and sometimes earlier. Born on this day in 1887 was Field Marshal Viscount Montgomery. Montgomery is one of the most intriguing and central figures in the history of the Second World War, for he would be the military genius behind the victory in North Africa and, of course, the defeat of Field Marshal Erwin Rommel. And following his birth, on this day in 1931, Michael Freeman, English orthopedic surgeon who pioneered new surgical procedures for replacement of hip, knee, and ankle joints, was also born on this very day in 1931, November the 17th. And unfortunately, on this day in 1917, Auguste Rodin, French sculptor of the statue The Kiss, would pass away on this day. His death would be mourned by the modern art community. Prior to his death in 1558 occurred the death of Mary I, also known as Mary Tudor or Bloody Mary, the Catholic queen in Protestant England or Protestant Britain, who was succeeded by Elizabeth I. And lastly, we unfortunately mark the death of Dame Gladys Cooper, a famous English actress and Gaiety girl, well, former Gaiety girl. Her death would also be mourned by the acting community of the United Kingdom. And on that unfortunate note, we conclude today's headlines of the day. You are watching and listening to Historian Radio's Echoes of the News, and I would humbly request you to stay tuned to Echoes of the News and Historian Radio's other series for fascinating updates on today, the past, and hopefully the future. That is it for today. These were today's headlines as history first heard them. Good night.